So welcome. Please know that this webinar is well thought out between Sandra and I. And so we have a lot of information to share with you based on our experience, but we also are welcome to hearing and understanding your experience. So a little bit about ourselves. I'm going to have Sandra introduce herself, and then I'll let you know a little bit about who I am. So you have a sense of, we might have some experience that will be helpful for you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Sandra Klein. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I've spent the better part of the last 25 years working in hospice and palliative care, transitioning between management roles and direct care. My goal has always been to help the patients I worked with advocate for themselves and to also act as a guide to help them understand what lie ahead for them. So it's an absolute honor to be here today, and I hope I can bring a little bit of that knowledge to each of you in a helpful way.
Yes, we're very grateful to have Sandra join us. She's new to our team, so I hope you'll join me in welcoming her along the way as well. My name is Jeanice Hansen. I'm the Support Services Program Director at COCA. I've been with COCA a year. And my background is that I worked in a hospital setting for 10 years, and then in 2000 moved into specializing in oncology support, both in clinics and in hospitals, and a little stint in hospice care myself. So hopefully our experience will be meaningful for you, and that we'll learn more about yours as well. So this webinar is for all of us, whether we're actively living with progressive disease, loving someone who is, or deeply aware of our own mortality. Everybody thinks about death, but most of us don't want to talk about it. And I'm guessing that's been true for you as well. It opens us up to the most tender parts of ourselves and others. So serious illness can cast a dark shadow across the landscape of our lives. And so today we hope to add a little more light and create space to have this conversation. But I know it will not be the last one that you have. At least we hope it won't be the last discussion or thoughts you will share about this topic. And grieving the loss of someone you know will bring the subject even into more awareness. So this topic is not for the faint-hearted. So I know it took a lot for you to be here, a lot of courage and some curiosity to be here and watch this video. And I want to honor that for each of you. So before we begin, let's do a little exercise that will help you calm yourself if you're feeling especially anxious. And it may be as simple as taking some slow, deep breaths, putting your hand on your heart and on your belly, and just breathing into that, feeling yourself in your body. Because part of what we know is when we feel anxious, our body feels it first. And so part of what helps us calm is to actually touch our body, get grounded in our body, and take the steps that help us calm our nervous system. And please do this as often as you need to today. You're welcome to also come in and out in terms of leaving and stepping aside for a while and coming back in. That's all right. It's hard to sit in discomfort. As this statement says, the analysis of death is not for the sake of becoming fearful, but of approaching this precious lifetime. So the idea, again, is not to add more fear, but to actually create a space where you find some sense of groundedness in the topic. So as we sit in this discomfort of talking about our mortality, it's one of the most uncomfortable truths about life that we tend only to think about when we're faced with it. But it's an abstract idea for which we have no personal lived experience other than through the loss of others who are important to us. So it takes a while for our brain and our heart to make sense of it. However, talking about it openly can actually provide some relief. And hopefully this will help you find a reasonable level of comfort with what is discomfort or uncomfortable. The irony is that, again, our brain is always engaged in this emotional experience. So when our brain discovers that nothing horrible happens when we feel into this discomfort, we actually develop a sense of ease with it. as you know, once you say things out loud, often it's a relief rather than holding it all in. So when we deliberately talk about death, we acknowledge the impermanence of life and hopefully become more inspired to live with intention and purpose. So it's this dual reality of being in the moment and also anticipating what lies ahead. And for many of us, when we think about death or dying, there's a lot of grief associated with it. It's hard to imagine not being and having a sense of saying goodbye. So anticipatory grief is part of that. It's how we begin to think about what it will be like. And it's very complex and normal part of the experience. So it's the sorrow and other feelings we experience when a loss is anticipated, and it occurs for everyone, especially those close to us. So this webinar is intended not for those of us, only for those of us facing the end of our life. It's also for those who anticipate the loss of others that we love and care about. So this is an open discussion that we hope to encourage between both you as a survivor and your caregivers, people who care about you. So we're all trying to cope with the impact of death. And open communication about it between couples and family members is very important, because this grief is compounded when others around us are dying too, and we grieve for them and ourselves. And we begin to process what it means for us personally. It's about living in two worlds, the normal and the surreal. So it's common for you and your family to experience all of these, and you can see the common thoughts and emotions that are here, but there may be more that you're experiencing. So anticipatory grief occurs in the space between holding on and letting go. While it seems strange, it's possible to live with both at the same time. You don't have to choose between them, but you will move in between those two worlds. It may include the following. So you'll have problems with sleep. It's not unusual to fluctuate back and forth between feeling like you're ready and not ready. You might have intense emotions about it, as will others around you. You may have a time where you're feeling calm and have a sense of groundedness and readiness, and the people around you may not. And so that can trigger those feelings all over for you. And so it's a matter of finding a sense of your own balance, your sense of who you are in this experience, and allowing all of those emotions to move through you. So as you think about what these offer you, it's a time where you can recognize that it's normal and know that what you're experiencing and what others are experiencing about this are very common, but you'll experience them likely at different times. And so it is also a time between holding on and letting go when you have a strange feeling of living in both worlds at the same time. And as we said, you don't have to choose between them. Allow yourself and others to move freely between them. So it's time where you might be confronting your fears and feelings rather than avoiding them. Sometimes saying things out loud that you've been holding in for a long time that need to be said. And it's also a time where you begin to think about, what is it that I haven't done yet that needs to happen? So it may be very practical, logistical. It may also be saying certain things, telling people you love them, saying goodbyes in some ways. It may include forgiveness, as well as a sense of thinking about your life in a larger scale of both spiritual as well as physical. And then there's an opportunity to settle differences. I often say when the body doesn't heal, sometimes relationships can. And so this might be a time where you begin to really talk through those things that have been hard in your life, and you try to clear up misunderstandings, let people know that you care about them, and that you have a sense of talking about those things that may have been suppressed or hidden for a long time at a level that feels safe and appropriate for you. Sometimes it might be just writing letters and maybe not even mailing them, but getting all of that out. And so also the connection with others. And we usually use this time as a time where we remember important experiences, we share them with others, and we also have a sense that there's a part of us that even if we're leaving this physical experience, holds a bond to those that remain. So there are times where those who are thinking about saying goodbye to us are also thinking about what parts of us in our lives are they going to really remember and hold on to that really represent who we are. And grief is another way to express love. So knowing that people are grieving or that you're grieving just means that it's very important to you in terms of your relationships, what people say, what you decide to do, and how you hold yourself in this life. And know that you're loved and you have loved. And then it's also a time to actually begin to prepare and plan so that you think about what is it that you might want to do now that can be carried forward in the future. And we'll talk a little bit about legacy work a little bit later on. You know a little bit more about how you create those memories that will support those continuing bonds with people who still remain. So let's talk about the dying first, because I know this is what drew you to this presentation, is to be able to say some of these things out loud, recognize and honor your own beliefs and concerns about it. And so as we're living in both the living and the dying experience, we're going to explore both. So grief about dying is real and how we deal with it matters. So it's hard to imagine not being here any longer. But it is also important to begin to think about and maybe speak about how we want to prepare for this transition in our life. So these are pressing questions that many of you have in terms of what do you believe about dying? What have you learned about it? Maybe from television programs or other experiences. And you've decided for yourself, yes, I want that to be how I hope to die, or my experience in terms of grace, or I really want to go down swinging in terms of fighting to the very end, because I believe that's important. And then what's your spiritual belief about it? It doesn't necessarily have to be a religious one in terms of a certain type of religion, but the sense of who are we beyond this body? What might lie ahead? What sort of holds us in comfort? It's also a time to really think about the possibility that we could heal our suffering. Many of us have a long history of having disappointments, having things not go well, having a sense of loss of other things in our life, or missed opportunities. And so those regrets and that pain and disappointment also deserves our attention. And sometimes it's really important, or comes to us as an important step in healing that suffering and being able to let go and lay down some of that heavy burden. And then also facing our greatest fears, saying them out loud, asking for ways to soften, comfort, or assuage them. And of course, talking with others about it. What do they believe about the experience? What are they concerned about, as well as what we believe and are concerned about, so that we can share that with each other and then begin to talk through them in terms of ways that help comfort both of us. Also, an important time to really communicate our wishes, not let them just be something that we hope people know and understand, but that we actually make them verbal, and as well as sometimes in writing. And then knowing that people are observing us just as we observe others with regard to how do we want to hold ourselves in this experience? What do we hope others will know and learn about our experience, and then be able to take that forward in their own life? And as we talked about the memories, looking back at what has our life been? What are those things that we're really proud of, that we've accomplished, that we've done or still want to do, and have a sense of seeing ourselves as more than a physical body, but that it is one of a life that's been lived fully. So as we think about what we believe about dying, it's important to know, how did we formulate those, and whose voice is speaking? Is it just ours, or are we repeating something we've heard or something someone has told us? And then how do we sort out what we believe versus what we've been led to believe? And if what we believe no longer serves us, is it helpful or important to think about changing that or modifying that a little bit? So these are some of the things that we might hear ourselves saying or thinking, or other people might be saying or thinking in terms of death as a failure, that we didn't do enough, the doctors didn't do enough, it's not fair, we should never have gotten this sick. And so we have a sense of anger and disappointment and frustration. And we also find that it's hard to be angry at cancer. It's also hard to be angry at God, angry at anyone that or anything that you feel might have made a difference but didn't. So now is an opportunity to begin to think about what is that and how is that being released. Someone recently told me that they know their irritability is not about other people in their life, but they take it out on other people. And so they're trying to find the sense of recognizing how their anger and fear is coming out, maybe addressed at people that really haven't earned it or don't deserve it. And some people think that they got their disease or are dying because they deserved it for some reason, which always makes me feel sad for them in the sense of ever thinking that they deserve to suffer, and that it is a sense of required experience to sort of prepare for the end of life, is to feel like they are releasing some of that burden. And we may think that, we if with enough effort, we're going to beat this. If we just try hard enough, if we didn't try hard enough, maybe we wouldn't have been in this place. So again, the sense of judgment that may not be very helpful or very supportive. And some of us might think that if we talk about death, it's just going to make it happen sooner, that we shouldn't even entertain the idea. So as you think about these things in terms of what happens with your soul, if you've had a good life, it comes down to a variety of perspectives that both are your own and maybe those you adopted from others. So sorting out those beliefs and deciding for yourself, are they helpful or are they more hurtful? Do they prolong the suffering or do they give you some relief from the suffering? So it's not about whether we believe any of these things are true or not. It's about whether or not they're helpful or not. And when you think of them, do they help you feel better or worse? And how else might you look at these beliefs and what new ones might you create? So as we begin to think about sort of the nuances and the details of what comes with preparing for the end of life or anticipating that from someone, as far as end of life for someone we love, these are the things that really come into mind. And I certainly will invite Sandra to participate in part of this discussion as well. So part of the preparation you may have heard about involves advance directives. So things like the living will, medical power of attorney, the most form, which is the medical, let's help me with that. The most form is, it has to do with how the physician and the medical team addresses your medical needs. And then of course your will, estate planning, legacy projects. So we referenced that a little bit earlier. Legacy projects are things that you might be doing that have a future focus for a time that you may not be alive. So it could be making a quilt for someone that they is made of clothing that you've worn often. I've seen quilts in earlier days when aprons were popular, where it was made with pieces of clothing and aprons. It may also be writing letters to children or friends for future events that you might not be present for. So it can be a variety of things that can be physical and something that actually can be passed along after you have died. And then, of course, funeral parlors, as they used to say in the early days. So funeral homes often provide prepaid plans, as well as they have really nice booklets or workbooks that you can use to actually write out a lot of things that you really want for your own funeral. So that might include what happens with your body, whether you donate it or you want cremation or burial, whatever that might be. And so that leads into the what. Where do you want to die? Whether it's at home, is there a specific room? There have been instances where individuals really wanted their bed by the window and they wanted to be able to see outside and watch their flowers grow, or actually be out on their porch or their deck, whatever it is in terms of an environment that's really important to you, and know that you have choices about that. We may not have ever a choice about exactly how we die or when we die, but when we do, it's really important to know that there are things we can still choose and make known as far as something that brings us comfort, something that we have a sense of knowing that's part of who we are and it represents who we are. So again, where it has to do with your actual burial in terms of where and if. So cremation or burial, or having your body transported to another state or city, whatever that might involve. Important part about hospice, though, is some people think that if they're in hospice, they will always die in a hospice facility. But it's important to know that hospice does offer a respite option when people are very, very sick and cannot be managed at home. But that is not something that is always part of the plan and is not an extended period of time. So having a sense of where you will be in your final days and weeks is an important determination for you. And then who will be present? What family do you want to come visit? What friends or caregivers will be present with you, whether you'll utilize hospice services or not, and when. One of the things I often hear is that people are wondering when they should choose hospice. And unfortunately, we find from research that most people choose hospice only in the final days and maybe a few weeks before their death is imminent. And I'd like to encourage you to consider that hospice actually is available to anyone who is anticipated to live for 6 months or less, and that the services actually are so important that some research says people live longer because they're getting such good comfort care and they're actually having all of their supportive needs met. So keep that in mind in terms of if and when that decision comes to you as far as when. And you will know, you may have a discussion or a how do I say it, a different point of view between yourself and your family. So that'll be important to talk about up front in terms of what's that threshold for you, and a matter of then what it looks like. So it will be also an opportunity for you to choose the agency that's a good fit for you. They have a variety of staff members who are there to support you, everything from nursing to personal care for very basic things at home, not daily care, but also support from the social worker. They might have a music therapist or art therapist. So checking those things out will be important. And then death doulas are kind of a new concept, actually, what newer than you might have heard of for yourself. But these are individuals actually who have much more time and presence in terms of being with you toward the end of your life, doing a lot more preparation, talking with you about making sure all of your needs and preferences are being addressed and met in the best possible way. And so this may be something you want to explore. So as you look into this, you may just do a search for death doulas in Colorado and begin to meet with someone of them and get a sense of who they are and what they might be able to offer. Obviously, around a lot of people worry about a lot of pain issues and challenges when they're dying. And this is part of a normal concern. And hospice and palliative care actually are experts in this area. So they have ways to help people become comfortable and make choices about how sedated you might want to be with you, so that it's a matter of your goals of care being met, not just those of others. And again, there might be some disagreement between you and other people around you about what this looks like. So I encourage you to advocate for yourself in terms of what's really important for you, as well as what takes into consideration what other people might need. And that has to do even with some funeral planning. So, as we talk about all of these categories, please know that they don't stand alone, they interplay with each other. And so, it's going to be a matter of being aware of where you want to put your attention at any one time in terms of thinking about them for yourself and also discussing them out loud. So, a topic that comes up from time to time is medical aid in dying, or the Colorado end of life option. And we won't go into great detail about this, but we have a couple resource slides, and there will be links to resources that will explain this further. But to know that there is a preparation time. So it's not a decision that you make in the moment. There's a time where you need to discuss it with your physician, be evaluated that you're making the decision in a sound mind, and that you've really thought about it and are appropriate to make that decision in terms of where you are in your disease, as well as whether or not you've thought through it and are making it with sort of sound mind and understanding what the option means. And then it also involves a medication that you need to administer to yourself. Someone else cannot give it to you. It's usually a mixture of medications that are sedating. And it's a matter, again, of being able to ingest it. It usually is a thick liquid. And this can be delivered by the hospice team, who is also very aware of these guidelines and the process. And then, of course, the choice about what kind of service you want. We alluded to that with some pre-planning. Who will deliver the eulogy, maybe what kind of music you would like to have. So those, again, are choices that you get to make and get to convey to others, rather than having them make that choice for you. There's a wonderful article that is linked at the end of this slide presentation. We'll have a link to an article called End of Life Discussions or Conversations. Will be hard, or can be hard, but your loved ones will thank you for it. So again, as much as you can say upfront and communicate and discuss with those who are going to be part of this experience will help all of you. And of course, communication is the key. And there are ways to put this in writing and have the discussion by using programs like the Conversation Project, which is a workbook and it's online, that helps both caregivers and the individual who is facing the end of their life topics to consider and ways to introduce it that are respectful and thoughtful, not in a way that is telling people what they have to do, but being able to give them an opportunity to say what they want to do. Another document you probably heard about is called the 5 Wishes, and we'll have a link to that. Also, it's very important for you to ask your medical team and the hospice staff, if you utilize hospice, in terms of what will this be like. It's okay to ask that, asking very specific things about how will you manage this and what might I experience. And this is also helpful for caregivers who are going to be present with you, because they will want to know what's normal, what's not, and whether there's anything that they can do that will also provide comfort. And then lastly, but not least, is, what will your obituary say? Do you want to write it? Do you even want to have one posted? Or do you want to leave that up for other people to write? There are wonderful workbooks out there that you can also get online with regard to how do you want to share the story of your life? And so again, the idea is a life well lived and full that a lot of people may not know about you. And so it's about a sense of how do you let people know of your personhood, not just of your disease and what this might mean for you. So, in order to have these discussions, there are certain people that will be more helpful than others. And here's a list of some of the options that you might consider. And I love this comment or this passage from Fred Rogers that basically saying talking about it actually makes it less overwhelming. And you want to have that conversation with people that you trust who can have this conversation and you know that you're not alone. The interesting thing about being someone who is very seriously ill and those around us is that we're often thinking about the same questions. And it's hard to say it out loud, but when we begin to actually do that, we find that we have that common ground and we're not alone in wondering about what it will be like and what we can do to help soothe ourselves and others along the way. So, with regard to others, you want to choose people who actually can have the conversation without you feeling like you have to constantly be comforting them. Now, that very well could be part of it, but you also want to have people who can allow that discomfort and sit with that, who can provide both emotional support and practical support, but you get to say where the focus is. And so you know that not everyone may be able to have the conversation in terms of the way that you want. So being thoughtful about who they might be, whether they're loved ones or your medical team, spiritual advisors, whoever that might be in your life, and then others. A lot of you are in the Nikki Circle support program and groups, and you find a great deal of support and comfort in talking about these things with people in those groups. Now, some people may not be able to hear it as comfortably, but you'll have a sense of who they are and who you can connect with in those groups or outside of those groups. And you may be forming separate groups of your own that you know are very supportive in nature, friends that you've known for many years. And maybe new people will come into your life that you'll be surprised by that can actually provide a space to have these conversations. So, whoever you choose is try to choose people who will allow you to express your emotions, however raw or sensitive or uncomfortable they might be. And hopefully, you'll have people who won't tell you how you should feel. Or what you should think. You probably have encountered some folks that said, "Oh, don't think that way. Just think positive. You'll be fine. You'll beat this." And there's a part of you that might know, I'm not so sure that's true for me, for what I know. And so it's a matter then of how can you allow yourself to say things that other people might not necessarily agree with, even though their best intentions are to support you and comfort you. It may not be as helpful for you when you think about this differently. And so, as far as you want to find someone that can help you face your fears, as well as not feeling like you have to agree with how they might approach it, but that they actually offer something of comfort and value for you to consider and try. So, this will be a matter of talking about what you want or need. It could be a matter of also just talking about how hard it is and not wanting them necessarily to fix anything, but to be able to listen compassionately and thoughtfully. You may want to actually ask them, what would you do? Or what do you think might help? And then actually ask for specific guidance. So this will be part of, again, what you decide is right for you. And it is always a balance with regard to also being thoughtful about what do others need from you. They might just need time or space, or they might need to talk about things in a more superficial way and not ready to talk about things deeply. One of the questions that came in is regard to I'm doing fairly well with this topic, but my kids are not. So what do I do with that? And so again, it's a matter of, I think part of what you'll find yourself doing is a little bit of pacing and leading. So you might be the one that introduce the topic and say, I've been thinking about this and I'm wondering if you have too, and can we talk about it? And they may not be able to talk about it in the moment, but you can arrange a time to say, hey, I know this might be hard to talk about right now, but do you think we could talk about it tomorrow or later today or next week, whatever it might be, so that you're opening the topic, you're normalizing that and giving the others around you who are scared for you and for themselves in terms of what it will be like, so that they can begin to prepare for that conversation as well. Of course, your medical team can answer specific questions and concerns about your physical well-being and pain management. And then you can have deeper conversations with other people who maybe share your faith or have a spiritual perspective that help you have a sense of knowing you'll be all right, or that there is something lying ahead or available to you that's actually going to hold you in love and in light. And so it may be a matter of also talking about those things that you have not asked before with regard to your faith or your spiritual life or life after death. And so you can have those conversations with someone, again, who holds the knowledge and the expertise to be able to share their wisdom with you. And as far as other kinds of resources, there may be some that aren't on this list that you have wondered about or thought about, and you can add them too. So begin with the question of what do I need and who can help me meet my needs? It would be remiss of us to think about just dying and not also be able to incorporate what it is to live in terms of what do we do and how do we want to live until we die. So now that we've covered much of what brought you to this webinar, let's talk about what else there is that you can direct your attention to that is still very meaningful. So beginning to think about what we want to live and how we want to live is very, very important. So why do we want to live? And how is it that we will live in the time that we have in terms of being seen and heard and remembered? So it's important to know that today we are alive. So how do we want to use this time? What do we want to do today? And this is true for any of us. So it doesn't matter whether we have a progressive illness or not. We know that all of us are mortal, and there will be a time where we won't be here anymore. And so how do we really want to live the life we have, the today that we have? There's a really good book, and the reference is called Four Things That Matter Most. And it was written from the perspective of a hospice physician who actually interviewed about 900 people who were facing the end of their life and asked, what is it that you need to do before you die so that you can say goodbye? And they were to say, I love you, thank you, forgive me, and I forgive you. Now, the last two are pretty tough, so I will acknowledge that particular piece. But his then takeaway message is don't wait until the end of your life. Do those things now, because we don't know what our future will hold. And to live while we're living with thought and commitment and compassion and passion is really important. So what is important to you? What are your priorities in terms of, is your life actually reflecting what those are? A lot of times people will tell me that they're living their obligations and they really haven't allowed time to live their passions. And they don't know how to take care of themselves because they've been taking care of other people most or all of their life. And so having a sense of then what do we do with that? How do we reconcile the sense of where the gap is with regard to what's really important to us and how we've lived our life? So we'll be talking a little bit about opportunities for learning, for healing, for growing, and to recognize this is a time really to recognize that we are alive now, and that how we spend our time in this day, in this week, in this month, this year, whatever time we have, is important and requires some conscious commitment and thought about what that's going to look like. So, why do we live? Uh, in terms of, it is about experiencing everything. So, how does that show up in terms of what are your sources of love, of joy, of awe, creativity, and connection? And when something feels good, we feel relaxed, open, and connected to others and ourselves. So the more we notice these moments, the more likely these moments are to occur. There was a phrase in terms of, the more you focus on what you really want, the more you have an opportunity to actually create that experience in your life. And that how we're living in between these experiences. There's not a sense that everything is wonderful all the time or everything is awful all the time, although you might feel like that. It's to recognize there's a mix of both. And how do you live in between sort of those high highs and low lows with a sense of still finding meaning in all of it? So it doesn't have to be an intense experience to be a meaningful experience. And also, we're going to experience the hard stuff, the sadness, the grief, loss, and pain. And we have to acknowledge these and find ways to work through them or live through them, I guess is the better way to say it. As far as achieving healing in ways that may not be physical, but that are still meaningful with regard to releasing regrets, asking for forgiveness, allowing ourselves to see life in a bigger way in terms of not having it be one thing in our life that defines us, but that there are many, many parts of our life that define us. And so having a sense of where do we want to put our attention? Some of these are really big emotions, and the human tendency is to close down and resist them. But we notice that they still persist. So it's time we might be willing to be with them, explore them, again, find a level of comfort with what's uncomfortable, and learn how to keep them from overwhelming us and controlling our lives. So this might be something we're willing to do at this time. And you can ask yourself your own timing with regard to, are you willing to go to that place? Think about that. Begin to find ways to resolve that difficulty and have more relief and a sense of groundedness. So being a spiritual being, having a human experience is hard, uh, but it is important for us to know that we are so much more than this disease, this tired and sick body, or having the sense of just this moment. And it's important to know that our life mattered and was spent purposely. So, what are your reasons? Why are you living? Why is it important for you to be here in the time that you have? How do you want to express that in the time that you have before you have to say goodbye? So, we look at what our values and priorities are. What is really important and matters most to you? And these are some categories that might inspire some personal reflection and introspection, both for you and to also hear from others in terms of how you mattered and how important you were to their life. So we want to know that our life is informing our decisions in thoughtful ways by what we hold as important and who we are behind and beyond our disease. So, as we evaluate our values and priorities, this is a time to savor and pursue the good things in life and stop spending so much time on the things we can't control. A lot of times we feel out of control with serious illness and our impending death. And so, finding those places that we can control what's going on, we can control our attention, we can choose and make choices that are meaningful to us, are really important to remember in times when we feel out of control. So, if we find that we're not living our values and priorities, these are some places that you can start in terms of exploring the opportunity to do some of these things and be able to actually make things happen that are important, or be able to recognize how much you have experienced in your life and value that. And so while cancer may have robbed you of many things, there's still time in life when you can be authentic and love in your life, as far as have compassion for yourself and others. So, looking at these, what are some of the things you might consider that would be helpful and support living your values, living authentically, doing what actually is important to you? A lot of people will say, hey, I'm not willing to put up with this kind of behavior or this kind of environment anymore. I'm really going to do what's important to me. And it can make some folks kind of ornery when they've been fairly complacent and passive in the past. And this can shake up the family and the support system a bit, where some things begin to really come to the surface with regard to this is what I want to do, not just what you think I should do. And being able to honor that in, a thoughtful and, of course, respectful way. We never encourage harm to yourself or others as a way of meeting these goals. But to have a sense that you are heard and are doing and sharing what's important to you, because you have the right to do that. And it's so important to do that in terms of living a life that you intend, not one that's just imposed upon you. Now, all the people who care about you and are there for you want this for you as well. They don't want you to suffer, but how their ideas of what you should do might be different. So again, honor what's true for you, what fits your priorities. So here is a poem that Sandra shared with me that I thought was really quite beautiful. And if you can indulge me, I'd like to read it to you. And so it basically recognizes that we can experience life from both sides at the same time. And part of our choice is deciding where we want to place our attention at any one moment. So what have your most difficult times revealed or taught you about living in this dual reality of recognizing both we are mortal and that we are alive in the same moment? So this poem reflects that. And so I'll just read the first part of it for you, and I'll leave you with reading the second stanza, and then there's a bit more after. So from the moment you were born, your death has walked beside you. Though it seldom shows its face, you still feel its empty touch when fear invades your life, or what you love is lost, or the inner damage is incurred. So, again, that pain. And the hope is that you'll have a generous heart, even as you befriend the mortality that you are facing so profoundly. And that you have a sense of knowing it's there and it gets your attention, but that as you gather yourself and decide carefully how you can now live the life you would love to look back on, that's the key. That's the important part of living in the now and being present with all of this. So, in terms of how we can cultivate that piece of being in both worlds, of recognizing our mortality as well as valuing our time and our life as it is, these are things that you might consider for yourself that will be most helpful. Learning to cultivate peace during this time is essential, actually, to living and dying well. These are common themes that I trust you will find benefit from and hopefully will explore for yourself. So consider how you might live and encourage them and for yourself to try some of these things. The most important part, I think, is being authentic and true to yourself while you're remaining open and curious. A lot of times our fears shut us down and we stop allowing new ideas or new perspectives to come in. And so allowing yourself to actually explore some of those things, even if it includes exploring what you're most afraid of, as well as what you have really appreciated and loved. Being kind and compassionate with yourself. We tend to be pretty critical of ourselves along the way in life, and we have a sense of judging that we're not enough, or we didn't do it enough, or someone else didn't do enough, or wasn't enough for us. And to begin to have some compassion for ourselves and each other, and trust that we are valuable and we are loved and we have the right to speak out for ourselves and ask for what we need. A lot of times, I know many of you have been frustrated by not getting your needs met, and it may lead you to stop asking. But I encourage you to keep asking, keep saying what's important to you, and doing what's important to you. So having it be a time where you can think back on what actually you've loved and has comforted you, and bring those feelings into mind as well. In fact, there's research that says when we take time to actually recall a memory that in which we felt love, sincere love, appreciation, and gratitude, we actually change the physiology of our body, and it is very calming. So, times when it feels overwhelming to think about all of this, and we need a reprieve, not necessarily a denial, but a reprieve from that heaviness, allowing yourself to really feel that grace, that love, that appreciation, and gratitude will allow you some rest and peace and all of that. And as we talked about earlier, that healing of suffering, releasing regret and shame and resentment, allowing yourself from holding on to that burden that actually leads you to feeling worse instead of better. So, how you connect with who you are as a spiritual being, again, whatever that might mean for you. It might be being part of nature, being part of a religious group, or a perspective that allows you to really do an evaluation of your goodness and your recognition that there's more than what you might see or know in this physical experience. So you can do that through a variety of ways. Prayer, meditation, obviously, is important. Being in nature and being places that you love are so powerful, and you probably recognize this from your own experience. In fact, I just read something recently with regard to how important it is to expose ourselves to natural light first thing in the morning, and how uplifting that is to at least be by a window where sunlight is coming in. And so knowing that there are things that actually you can do that are still within your control, activities that help cultivate your peace. There's a statement here that references acceptance, and I came upon a curious description of accepting and acceptance as being different. And accepting is being in the moment and acknowledging this is how things are, and I can be with it. Whether it feels good or feels awful, it's accepting that here I am now, present with this experience, and I can be with it. However it is, knowing that it's going to move through me, it's not going to persist in terms of never having any release or relief, but being in the present now. Acceptance, on the other hand, is the sense of a sort of a resignation that, okay, this is how it is. It's how I always see life. This is sort of the truth of putting everything all in one bucket as far as um, acceptance of all things versus just this moment. So there is a sense of then knowing where you are in terms of your own experience of accepting and acceptance. And then obviously letting go of what we can't control. We have the sense that if we fearlessly try to force things into submission and into control, we think we're actually making a difference. And the reality is we're sort of fooling ourselves or maybe misleading ourselves to think that we have control where we don't. And it keeps us busy, but it doesn't necessarily satisfy the need to actually do the things that make a difference for us, things that are within our control. And so having a sense of what can we let go that might be reflecting more of our fear than our sense of our own ability to choose the moment and the experience and the activities that will help us cultivate peace. So consider these for yourself and decide also how you might want to share that with other people so they know also how to support you and be present with you. So, this particular passage is really sweet in recognizing that even in the darkness, we are recognizing that life is a path of change, and that in the midst of the darkness, we're always looking for the light along the way, something that can inspire us, open us up rather than close us down. And I often use the analogy of when you go into a room, there's no dark switch, there's a light switch. And so having the sense of how you can begin to turn the light on, bring some light into your awareness, even when it feels really dark, and have a sense of you own this experience. You get to choose and focus on what matters most to you and ask for what you need. So, in summary, we know that dying is a part of life, but it's still hard to talk about. It's hard to be present with, either for ourselves or those we love. It's important to state what your preferences are and what you can do to honor them, to actually have a plan to know what that looks like for yourself, rather than just sort of haphazardly coming upon it saying, oh, yeah, that feels good, or it might be fun to do that, but actually deciding to do it, committing to your own preferences and values and priorities, and then living as fully as you can while you're living, doing what matters most. Taking time to actually allow yourself to heal emotional suffering. It is possible. So, those things that you regret or have been especially painful, to be able to talk to someone you trust to get that from the inside out. A lot of us carry shame and regret that we hold on to, but never really have an opportunity to lay it down, let it out, and be able to release ourselves from how it has held us back from living and loving in terms of our life. So do and say what's necessary to help you say goodbye with grace. So that means having these conversations up front and being able to hold um, the space where they can happen, encourage the space where they can happen, both for yourself and those that are important to you. And then exploring the actual strategies that do provide comfort and relief from your pain, suffering, and your sadness. So it might be taking on some new practices of meditation or prayer or walking in nature or listening to beautiful music, taking up a hobby. I'm always impressed and inspired by individuals who decide, okay, I've always wanted to learn how to paint. I'm actually going to sign up for a class to do that. Or just go to a sip and paint class, which is both fun and entertaining, as well as allows you to explore your creative side. It might be learning to play the piano or take up dancing or have a sense of exploring something that actually brings you joy and allows you to think about something other than the end of your life. And in that, cultivating peace, knowing that you're loved, having a sense of, oh, I'm okay in this moment. And I can be with whatever it is that I'm having to face. I can do hard things and have a way of knowing that you get to feel that experience, even in the middle of times where it might be very challenging, and you can still have some peace and relief. So, with that, we're at a time where we can begin to have some discussion about what questions you might have and what other things that we might not have covered that are important to you, whether we covered something that was right on or something that got missed. We can talk about all of that. So, Sandra, I'll have you help me. Did anything come through in the chat with regard to questions, or should we just open it up with people asking them with an open mic, so to speak?
First of all, thank you so much, Jeanice. Such a lovely presentation, and just really allowed us to look both at the end of our life while still living, and looking at duality so nicely. Looking at the chat, we do have one question in there, and I think we can start with maybe addressing that question and then opening it up to some questions or other conversations. Does that sound fair?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Jennifer asks, in your experience, who benefits most from having a death doula? I am hoping to be able to take some pressure off my 81-year-old father, who is showing signs of distress with my mother's illness, and like many of his age, have not adjusted particularly well to being a caregiver. Boy, that's a great question, Jennifer, and one that it was very familiar working in palliative and hospice care over the years. The death doula seems to be a new version of something, if you will, of a maybe their equivalent would be like a midwife. And so they go through a certification process, and they welcome themselves into someone's life during, initially following a diagnosis of a serious disease or terminal prognosis, and follow the family through end of life with some light counseling following death. I personally have not worked with a death doula in my years. I do feel like it's the start of a new industry that looks to further support people in their final chapters. But in the instance of your father showing signs of caregiver fatigue, very common, and often what people do in that situation, in my experience, they either hire in private caregivers, or they do consider, if it is appropriate, enrolling in a hospice or palliative care program that offers some of that functional support to the caregivers by offering a certified nurse's aide or a volunteer or a visiting nurse. And so each situation is a little bit different, and just understanding where your mother's illness is. But those are some of the options I've seen in the past work well for families.